Hello and welcome to another Orange Coast College mathematics video. In this video, we're going to learn to solve quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. Now, the quadratic formula is considered by many to be the most straightforward approach to solving quadratic equations, in that it always works. Sometimes if you want to solve a quadratic equation by factoring, for instance, the quadratic polynomial you have may not be factorable. But you can always use the quadratic formula. Now, how do we use the quadratic formula? Well, we must have all of our terms in our quadratic equation on one side. So you should have a 0 on one side of the equation, and then you'll have ax squared plus bx plus c. And then you just have to plug in the coefficients into the formula. So the x will be equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and you divide all of that by 2a. You will want to memorize this. If you want to master this technique, you will need to memorize this. Now, don't forget when you're applying it, these a, b, and c coefficients can have positive or negative signs, and you're going to want to make sure you do incorporate those into here. So if this were like ax squared, whatever it was, minus 5, then negative b would be negative times negative 5, positive 5. Example 1. All right, first note, all of our terms are on one side of the equation. We have a 0 on one side. So now we simply identify the coefficients. So here the coefficient of x squared is 1. Okay, so we have a is 1, and then the coefficient of x is 5. So we have that b is 5. And the constant coefficient is negative 14. Okay, we're including the negative sign in there. So that means that our constant coefficient c is negative 14, and then we simply plug these values into the quadratic equation. So x will be negative b, that means it's negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 25, minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 14, and we divide all of that by 2a, which is 2. Now, 4 times 1 times 14 is 56. So if we have negative 4 times 1 times negative 14, we get positive 56. So this will simplify into negative 5 plus or minus the square root. We get 25 plus 56, which is 81. We divide that by 2, and this will become negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 81, which is 9, all over 2. So either we have negative 5 plus 9, which would be 4 divided by 2. That will give us 2. Or we have negative 5 minus 9. That's negative 14 divided by 2. That would be negative 7. And so there we arrive at our two solutions to our quadratic equation. Example 2. Here we have a is 5. Okay. B is negative 3. And c is positive 1. So now we simply plug all of that into the quadratic formula. So we have x is going to be negative b. So negative b will be negative 3. So that's positive 3. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So b squared is negative 3 squared. So that's going to be positive 9. And then minus 4 times a times c. Okay, which is 5 and 1 respectively. And then divided by 2 times a. Now what we end up with here is 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 20 over 10. However, 9 minus 20, that is a negative number. And so there are no real numbers that are the square root of a negative number, right? We get negative 11 in there. So this has no real solutions. And that will happen sometimes when this quantity b squared minus 4ac, which we call the discriminant, when that's a negative number, you will have no real solutions. Now, if you're interested in complex numbers, this will have complex solutions, but that's another video. Example 3. So to use the quadratic formula, I need to move all of the non-zero terms to one side of the equation. So that means we need to add 9 to both sides here. And that will leave us with 4x squared plus 12x plus 9 equals 0. And now we can use the quadratic formula. So our a is 4, our b is 12, and our c is 9. So we apply the quadratic formula now. X will be negative b, so negative 12, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 144, minus 4 times a is 4, times c is 9. And then divide that all by 2a. Okay, now this becomes negative 12 plus or minus. So 4 times 4 times 9 is 144. So this just gives us a 0 here. So we get, this just simplifies into negative 12 over 8, because plus or minus 0, doesn't matter if it's plus 0 or minus 0, it's the same thing. And so finally we can simplify this. Both 12 and 8 have a factor of 4. So this becomes negative 3 over 2. So in this case, we have only one real solution. Here's our final example. All of our terms are already on one side of the equation. We have a 0 on the other side. So we just have to identify our coefficients. So a is 3, b is negative 5, and c is negative 4. And now we apply the quadratic formula. So it's going to be x equals negative b, in this case that will be 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 5, quantity squared is 25, minus 4 times a is 3 times c is negative 4. And so we divide that by 2a, which is 2 times 3. Now, here we get 5 plus or minus, so it'll be 4 times 3 times 4 will give us 48, right? It'll be 12 times 4. So this is going to be 25 minus negative 48, or 25 plus 48. 25 plus 48 is 73, and that can't be simplified. So our final answer here is just going to be 5 plus or minus the square root of 73 over 6. Now this is actually two numbers, just to be clear. It's 5 plus the square root of 73 over 6, and 5 minus the square root of 73 over 6. Okay, using the quadratic formula is, relatively speaking, straightforward. And like I said, for any quadratic equation, it will always find the solutions. But that being said, it does require some practice to use it, and you must memorize the formula. Until next time, have fun.